Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tarks Gauntlet Top 10 of 2021. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tarks. I mostly play JRPGs and some kind of weird so if you guys like the sound of that, consider hitting that subscribe button. General rules for this video are pretty simple. No ports, no straight remakes, no remasters. The games also have to come out in 2021 or at least very late 2020. Now there are going to be a couple missing games on this list that you might expect to see here. Neo: The World Ends With You and Shin Megami Tensei 5 are probably the biggest ones. Now those games aren't going to be here because, quite frankly, I just never really got into the series. And it wasn't for a lack of trying either. Controls pushed me away from the World Ends With You on DS, and Shin Megami Tensei just never really clicked with me. I tried a couple of them, didn't really go anywhere. Maybe someday, but not today. Now, before any of you go off and say, oh, you know, you really gotta play these games before you make a list like this, let me give you another perspective.
Don't do that, you f***er!
If I played all the same games as everybody else and felt the same way as everybody else, I would be making the same video as everybody else. And if I had to make the same video as everybody else, I wouldn't make this video at all. I ain't really about that boring. So if you guys want to see something that's maybe a little bit unexpected or, you know, has a few games that you maybe never heard of, then you've come to the right place. So with that, let's get into it. Number 10. Coming in at the top of the bottom here, we have Gust's turn-based RPG Blue Reflection Second Light. The surprise sequel to the game I figured was too obscure to ever get one. But with this sequel, I gotta say, they done almost everything right. Blue Reflection Second Light follows in the footsteps of its predecessor while addressing nearly all of its problem areas, increasing the focus on storytelling, developing its characters more, expanding combat to something incredibly fresh and interesting, then adding an entirely new crafting and base building aspect on the side, which directly contributes to the character stat progression systems. It may be a little heavy on the social elements and the cast may be a tad bloated, but it is an undeniable step in the right direction and one that I think only elevates the series and its developers. Number 9. In the number 9 slot, we have the action RPG Scarlet Nexus, a new IP from former Tales of alums that took JRPG fans by complete surprise. Though Scarlet Nexus didn't win me with its story or anything, what it did do really well was its combat. And honestly, this may have the funnest combat system of the year. It's fast, flashy, strategic, original, and damn inspiring. In Scarlet Nexus, ability combinations and permutations are key, and it never gets old finding new ways to use your familiar sets of powers. It's one thing to be able to turn invisible, or make clones of yourself, or slow down time. It's another thing altogether to be able to do all of those at once and boost your DPS through the roof. Scarlet Nexus nails the feeling of a power trip, but without taking away the challenge, and it constantly calls upon players to explore the systems it offers and find new ways to tackle every situation. Number 8. In the number 8 slot, we have Ember Labs' action-adventure game, Kena Bridge of Spirits. This is one I had my eye on for a long time and finally snagged when the physical edition dropped on PS5. As a debut from a AA indie studio, its trailers gave a lot to live up to, and thankfully, they done just that. Though combat could use some work and benefit from a more weighted feel, this action-adventure game still pulls through by providing a unique cultural backdrop to a familiar story, a wide range of idyllic locations, and near top-of-the-line Pixar-esque animations and character designs. An absolute stunner of a first release that promises a bright future for developers Ember Lab. Number 7. Coming in for the number 7 spot, we have the horror platformer Little Nightmares 2. Yes, this technically came out in 2020, but in December of 2020, so I'm including it as part of this year's list. Little Nightmares 2 is more or less the same sort of bag as the first game. A limbo-esque world where smaller-than-life characters platform and puzzle solve their way across spooky and larger-than-life environments, painted in 700 different shades of blue. There's not much of a direct story here, just as there wasn't in the first game, leaving any meaning open to the players to decide. But alas, the core strength of this game lies simply in its atmosphere and creative location and creature designs, as well as some high-tension set pieces and obstacles throughout. Though I'm torn on whether or not I like the first or the second one more, I'm just happy this quaint little duology hasn't faltered by me yet, and I look forward to what's coming next. Number 6. After a long hiatus, action RPG series Tales of returned to massive critical acclaim with Tales of Arise, which occupies the number 6 position on today's list. Though a somewhat safe entry in the franchise, Arise done what it needed to upon returning the most, and opened the doors to a new audience while pushing key areas forward and preparing us for the new generation of games. Just as we've seen in the franchise's many evolutions in the past, the game didn't come without growing pains, but it still came with a very strong promise for the future. Now, where this is a Tales of game, it's hard to say much about it in a video like this. At least it's hard to say much that you wouldn't already know. But if you're interested in a deep dive, I do have a 40+ minute review of the game on my channel, and a link for that can be found in the description below. As a longtime fan of the franchise, I enjoyed it a great deal, but I also had a lot to say. Number 5. Taking the middle of today's list, Fuga Melodies of Steel, the turn-based RPG, is probably the game that needs the attention the most. Not only is Fuga one of the most original RPGs I played all year, blending strategic social elements with a really unique approach to turn-based combat in a sort of advanced war style of presentation, with a board game-oriented approach to exploration and branching paths with a risk and reward system of decision-making, it is also the game that failed to meet its sales expectations the most, which, as a labor of love for developers of CC2, really hurts to see, reportedly only making 30% of its budget back. Now, there are a number of factors that contributed to the poor sales performance, but they're not things that simply pointing out here will help fix in any way. So if you're even the slightest bit interested in what you see right now, check the link in the description for my full review of the game and maybe consider supporting its release from there. They could really use it. Otherwise, yeah, it's a really neat game. Super interesting mechanics, a cute cast of furry friends, some really unexpectedly dark and harrowing moments along the way, and some of the best music of the year. Seriously, check out the track Elegy of the Winds. It's an absolutely hauntingly beautiful piece, in both languages, but I think the French version takes the cake. Number 4. Coming in to take the 4th slot here, we have Monster Hunter Rise. Monster Hunter World and its later expansion Iceborne set a very high bar for the franchise, and Monster Hunter Rise, launching first for the Nintendo Switch, didn't really have the ability to match it toe for toe. But rather than just taking a step forward, it takes a bit of a step to the side, carving a path all of its own while still maintaining much of what made World such a monumental leap forward. New traversal mechanics by the way of the wire bugs and a Best Boy doggo mount made action and exploration the fastest and most fluid it's ever been, even when using the slowest of weapon types, which I often do. The monster roster, while not up to the size of, say, Generations Ultimate, is very encouraging and offers a lot of variety between fights. The rinse and repeat grind of slaying monsters and making new gear is just as strong as it's ever been, and ensures that Monster Hunter once again remains the most addictive franchise of the modern era. Number 3. Taking the 3rd position, we have Metroid Dread. Now, I was never the biggest fan of 2D Metroid games growing up. I have nothing against them, they just never really hit me like this one did. Metroid Dread has to be the best paced game I played all year, constantly granting the player new power-ups and abilities that radically change the way you play the game, and massively expanding the world's accessibility in the process. Of course, these are staples of the titular Metroidvania genre, as it were, but rarely is it executed so well, and rarely does it just drive the player forward with such encouragement. Though not exactly a hard game outside of maybe the final boss, it offers a decent challenge in the way of its heart-pounding Emmy chases and its numerous bosses which require a good deal of strategy and reflexive ability to overcome. A quick 7 to 8 hour run to hit the credits, but it's a trip that'll be worth returning to again and again throughout the years. Number 2. Coming in at number 2 is Kowloon High School Chronicle, and this is a bit of a strange one to include. I did say no ports, straight remakes, or remasters and whatnot, and this game is anything but new. However, 2021 was the first time it officially released in English, so I'm going to allow it to qualify. Kowloon High School Chronicle blends elements of Shin Megami Tensei, Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, and Indiana Jones to make a really unique and interesting first-person dungeon crawler that's as archaic as it is endearing. Though its old-school quirks and frequently abstract puzzles may have some players scratching their heads in frustration, it takes me back to a time in gaming that I quite frankly miss a lot today. Kowloon's level of experimentation provided an experience that I find myself thinking back on more and more fondly as time goes on, and it created a blend of mechanics that I'm not sure I ever seen before, and we may never truly see again. In one way, shape, or form, I'd argue for the better, Kowloon High School Chronicle will be an unforgettable experience for me. Number 1. Coming in at number 1 is RGG Studios' Lost Judgment, the follow-up to 2019's Judgment. Lost Judgment is everything a good sequel should be, expanding on what made the first entry work while dialing back on or altering the areas that didn't. The combat has evolved gracefully, the OST provides some of the best tracks in the developer's history, and the detective mystery plot supported by one of gaming's best current cast of characters is of a considerably higher quality than most of the medium today. It raises the stakes for the franchise and asks players to consider things they otherwise wouldn't in deep and meaningful ways that not only manages to pull them along intellectually, but emotionally as well. Also, it lets you beat up bratty kids as a middle-aged adult. Lost Judgment really has it all. And if you want to hear more about it, make sure to check out my in-depth review in the description below. Lost Judgment easily earns 2021's Game of the Year from me, but you're not going to hear enough about it from this video alone. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my top 10 of 2021. I wouldn't exactly consider this the strongest year in gaming, like not by a long shot. In fact, out of the last 5 to 7 years, actually out of the last console generation, I'd probably rank this as like one of the lesser years. Launch year for the PS4 was probably far and wide worse than this year was, but otherwise, the years that followed that gave it some pretty stiff competition. But there were still a lot of great games in there. If you guys seen something you like, check the description below. I might have a review for it. About half the games on this list have been reviewed on this channel. And if you just discovered something new or you found the video helpful at all, you guys all know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the video if you can. Links to all of my socials are in the description below, and as always, folks, thanks for watching.